Imagine it's the late 1990s. You're sitting at a small, round table on a sidewalk in the Latin Quarter of Paris. The air smells like roasted coffee and Gauloises tobacco. It's 2 p.m. on a Friday, and the restaurant is packed with people drinking wine, laughing, eating steak frites. They aren't rushing back to the office. They aren't checking emails on a BlackBerry. Life is good. In fact, life is perfect. France just won the World Cup on home soil. The economy is roaring. They just passed a law that sounds like a utopia to the rest of the world. The 35-hour work week. They've legally decided that work is something to be contained, minimized, kept in its box. The philosophy is crystal clear. The Americans live to work, but the French work to live. You order another glass of Bordeaux and think to yourself, they figured it out. This is the end of history. This is the peak of human civilization. Now snap back to reality. It's 2025. You're standing on that same street corner, but the cafe is closed. Windows boarded up with plywood. The air doesn't smell like coffee. It smells like tear gas and burning plastic. In the distance, you hear the sirens. The farmers have blocked the highways with tractors. The trains aren't running. The garbage collectors have been on strike for 3 weeks, and the trash is piled up to the second-story windows. France isn't celebrating. France is burning. We see the headlines every few months. Riots in Paris. The yellow vests. Pension reform protests. We see the fire and we think it's just the French being French. We think it's a cultural quirk, like eating snails or refusing to speak English. But it isn't a quirk. It's a symptom of a mathematical collapse. We're watching a country that built a paradise on a credit card and the bill has finally arrived. France is stuck in what I call the entitlement trap, where the population has been promised a lifestyle that the economy can no longer afford to pay for. Today, we're doing an autopsy on the French model. We aren't looking at the politics or the culture wars. We're looking at the cold, hard numbers that explain why the Fifth Republic is slowly suffocating under the weight of its own generosity. This is the story of how a superpower becomes a museum. The anesthetic of public spending, or how to drug a nation. To understand why France is trapped, you have to understand the drug they're addicted to. In Italy, the drug was currency devaluation. In France, the drug is public spending. France is the world champion of government spending. It's not even close. It's not a contest. It's a blowout. The French state spends roughly 58% of the country's entire GDP. Think about that number. For every 100 euros generated in the country, the government takes and spends 58 of them. This is the highest in the developed world, higher than Sweden, higher than socialist legends like Finland. It makes the United States look like an anarcho-capitalist wasteland by comparison. Now, spending money sounds great, right? It builds high-speed trains. It pays for childcare. It pays for that famous healthcare system. But this spending acts as a massive anesthetic. It numbs the pain of economic reality. For 40 years, every time there was a problem, the French government didn't solve it. They wrote a check. Unemployment is up, create subsidized jobs. Factories closing, subsidize the industry. People are angry, send out inflation relief checks. This created a culture where the solution to every problem is the state. If your business fails, it's the state's fault. If you can't find a job, the state must provide one. Can't afford groceries. The state owes you a subsidy. But here's the catch. Here's where the math becomes inescapable. To spend 58% of GDP, you have to tax 58% of GDP. And this brings us to the first circle of French economic hell, the tax wedge. Let me introduce you to two characters. Let's call them Pierre and Thomas. Pierre wants to start a small graphic design agency in Lyon. Thomas is a talented designer. Pierre wants to pay Thomas a good salary, let's say $3,000 a month net into his pocket. A solid middle-class salary. In the UK or the US, Pierre pays Thomas, pays a bit of tax, and that's it. In France, for Thomas to receive $3,000 in his bank account, it cost Pierre's company nearly $6,000. Where did the other $3,000 go? It vanished into les charges sociales, social charges, a wall of money that sits between the employer and the employee like a bureaucratic vampire sucking the blood out of the transaction. This creates a deadly psychological effect. Pierre feels like he's paying a fortune. Thomas feels like he's underpaid. Both of them are right. The government has taken the meat out of the sandwich and left them both hungry. This is why French salaries have stagnated. It's not that companies aren't paying money, it's that the money never reaches the worker. It's siphoned off to pay for the retirees, the healthcare, the bureaucracy, the endless machine. And because hiring is so expensive, Pierre doesn't hire Thomas. He tries to do the work himself. He stays small, he stays scared. Just like in Italy, this tax wedge kills growth before it can even start. It incentivizes unemployment. If hiring someone is a punishment, businesses stop doing it. The French state has created an economy where the rational decision is to not create jobs. Let that sink in. It's time for 2, the fortress of labor, or the CDI prison. But let's say Pierre is brave. He decides to hire Thomas anyway. He pays the taxes. He signs the contract. Congratulations, Pierre. You just entered the second trap, the CDI. In France, the standard employment contract is called the CDI, Contrat à durée indéterminée. It's the holy grail of French life. If you have a CDI, you can get a mortgage. You can rent an apartment. You can show your face at family dinner without shame. You are a full citizen. But for the employer, signing a CDI is like getting married without the possibility of divorce. Once you hire someone on a CDI, it is mathematically almost impossible to fire them. If Thomas stops working hard, or if the economy crashes and Pierre loses his clients, Pierre cannot let Thomas go without a legal battle that can take years and cost tens of thousands of euros in severance. Think about that. You hire someone. They turn out to be lazy, or the market changes, or your business hits a rough patch. Too bad. You're stuck with them until they retire or die. So, what's the result? France has created a two-tier society, a caste system disguised as social progress. On the inside of the castle, you have the insiders. These are the people with CDIs, mostly older workers and civil servants. They're protected. They have 5 weeks of vacation. They have the right to disconnect. They have job security that would make a medieval guild master jealous. They are safe. On the outside, in the freezing cold, you have the outsiders. These are the young, the immigrants, the fresh graduates with master's degrees and no experience. Because companies are terrified of the CDI, they only hire young people on short-term contracts called CDD, Contrat à durée déterminée. These last 3 months, maybe 6 months, maybe a year if you're lucky. So you have an entire generation of young French people bouncing from temp job to temp job like a pinball. They can't get an apartment because landlords demand a CDI. They can't get a loan. They can't plan a life. They're living in a permanent state of anxiety, watching their parents enjoy the most protected labor market in the world. This is the fuel for the riots. When you see a 22-year-old burning a garbage can in Paris, he isn't just mad about a specific law. He's mad because the drawbridge has been pulled up. He's mad because the system was designed to protect his grandfather, his job at the expense of his own future. It's a war between the protected and the precarious are losing. 3, the de-industrialization disaster, or how to kill your working class. Now, let's leave Paris. Let's take a drive into the countryside, into what geographers call La France périphérique, peripheral France. If you drive through the old industrial north or the rural valleys of the center, you see the ghosts of a superpower. France used to be an industrial titan. They built the TGV trains. They built nuclear power plants that are the envy of the world. They built Concorde. They built Renault and Peugeot cars that were exported all over Africa and Europe. But starting in the early 2000s, France made a strategic error, a fatal miscalculation. They looked at the global economy and said, manufacturing is for poor countries. We're too sophisticated for that. We'll be a nation of services, luxury, and tourism. They let the factories close. They let the supply chains move to China and Eastern Europe. They bet the house on LVMH and Hermes. And to be fair, that bet paid off for the rich. Bernard Arnault, the owner of LVMH, is one of the richest men in the world. Selling $3,000 handbags to Chinese billionaires is a great business. But you cannot run a country of 67 million people on handbags. When the factories closed in the mid-sized towns, Maubeuge, Forbach, Charleville-Mézières, the life went out of them. The post office closed, the bakery closed. The doctor retired and nobody replaced him. The young people left for the cities and the old people stayed behind to die slowly. This created a geographical apartheid. In the metropolises, Paris, Bordeaux, Lyon, Toulouse, life is global, tech-savvy, and wealthy. These are the people who speak English, work for multinational corporations, and benefited from the euro and globalization. These are the people who can afford the $1,500 month rent for a shoebox apartment. In the periphery, life is a struggle for survival. These are the people who need their cars to get to work because there are no trains. So when the government raised the tax on diesel fuel in 2018 to save the planet, these people snapped. That was the birth of the yellow vests. The media told you the yellow vests were just hooligans, deplorables, racists. They weren't. They were the people who had been left behind by the strategy of deindustrialization. They were the people saying, you worry about the end of the world. We worry about the end of the month. France destroyed its own working class to build a service economy, but they forgot that a service economy only serves the people who have money. The guy who used to weld cars in a factory doesn't become a software engineer. He becomes unemployed, or he becomes a security guard making minimum wage, and then the government wonders why he's angry. Riots. 4. The 35-hour mistake, or how to lose a trade war while taking a nap. We have to talk about the elephant in the room, the symbol of French decline, the 35-hour workweek. Passed in 2000 under the socialist government of Lionel Jospin, the idea was simple. There's a fixed amount of work to be done. If we force people to work fewer hours, companies will have to hire more people to get the work done. They called it work sharing. It sounds logical if you're a child. In the real world of economics, this is known as the Mainau's lump of labor fallacy. Work isn't a fixed pie. Work creates wealth, which creates demand, which creates more work. The economy isn't a zero-sum game unless you legislate it into one. By capping the work week at 35 hours, France effectively told the world, we're closing for business at 4 p.m. It made French labor incredibly rigid. Hospitals became nightmares to manage because doctors and nurses hit their hourly caps. Small businesses stopped growing because the scheduling logistics were too complex. Big businesses just automated jobs away or moved them abroad. But the worst part wasn't the economic damage. The worst part was the cultural shift. It cemented the idea that work is a burden that the state must protect you from. That ambition is vulgar, that success is suspicious, that the goal of life is leisure, not achievement. While the Americans were inventing the internet, while the Chinese were building the factory of the world, while the Germans were reforming their labor market to be more competitive, France was negotiating how to work less. You cannot compete globally when your primary national goal is leisure. It's a beautiful goal. I love leisure. I would love to work 20 hours a week. But I don't expect to have the GDP of a superpower while doing it. France wants American GDP with Spanish siesta. The math doesn't work. 5. The pension time bomb, or the check that will bounce. And this leads us to the numbers that truly terrify the French treasury. The demographics. France actually has a better birth rate than Italy or Germany. They aren't going extinct quite yet, but they have a massive problem. The baby boomers are retiring and they expect to be paid handsomely. The French pension system is a pay-as-you-go system. There's no investment fund. There's no pile of gold or stocks sitting in a vault. The money taken from young workers today is instantly transferred to the bank accounts of the retirees. It works great when you have 4 workers for every 1 retiree. It creates a collapse when you have 1.7 workers for every 1 retiree. This is why President Macron tried to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64. Just 2 years, 24 months. Less time than it takes to get a PhD. In most countries, raising the retirement age to 64 would be seen as normal, even generous. In the UK, it's 66. In Germany, it's heading to 67. In the US, good luck retiring before 67 unless you want to eat cat food. In France, it triggered a revolution. Why? Because of the entitlement trap. The French people have been told for decades that their high taxes were the price of a comfortable early retirement. They paid their dues. They suffered the low wages. They suffered the tax wedge. They endured the bureaucracy. And now at the finish line, the government is moving the goalposts. They feel cheated. And they are right to feel cheated. And the social contract was broken. Not by them, by the people who designed a system that was mathematically guaranteed to collapse. But the government has no choice. If they don't raise the age, the system goes bankrupt. The deficit is already spiraling. France hasn't balanced a government budget since 1994. Not once. Not even during the good years. They've been borrowing from the future to pay for the present for 50 years. And the bond markets are starting to notice. Just like in Italy, the spread is widening. Investors are looking at France's debt, which is now over 110% of GDPs, and asking, how are they going to pay this back? The answer is, they can't. Not without massive reform, not without pain. If the interest rates stay high, France is in serious trouble. The kind of trouble that ends republics. 6. The aristocracy of the Grande Écoles, or why the elite don't get it. There's one more mechanism we need to expose. The reason why the French elite seems so disconnected from the people. Why they speak a different language. Why they live on a different planet. It's the education system. France prides itself on liberté, égalité, fraternité. But its school system is an elitist machine that makes the British class system look like a meritocracy. In France, your destiny is determined by a single exam you take when you're 20 years old, the concours. If you get into the grandes écoles, the elite universities like Polytechnique, HEC, or ENA, you're set for life. You become a CEO, a top politician, a high-ranking bureaucrat, you join the club. If you go to a regular university, good luck. You're nobody. You might as well have stayed home. This creates a ruling class that is incredibly homogeneous. They all went to the same schools. They all took the same classes from the same professors. They all speak the same technocratic language. They all live in the same zip codes in the 7th arrondissement of Paris. President Macron is the ultimate product of this system. He's brilliant. He's a genius by any objective measure. But he speaks to the French people like a management consultant, explaining a restructuring plan to a factory floor that is about to be laid off. This disconnect is fatal. When the elites say, we need to raise the gas tax to save the planet, they don't understand that for the guy in the countryside, that means he can't afford to drive to his job. When they say, we need pension reform, they don't understand that the worker has been planning his entire life around retiring at 62. They live in different worlds. They eat different food. They read different newspapers. They don't even speak the same French. And when the dialogue breaks down, when the trust disappears, the violence starts. 7. The Great Escape, or the best and brightest head for the exit. So, what do the ambitious French people do? The talented, the young, the ones who refuse to accept stagnation? They leave. Just like Italy, France is suffering from a massive brain drain. But it's a specific kind of brain drain. It's not desperate refugees. It's not unskilled workers. It's the exact people France spent hundreds of thousands of euros educating. If you walk through South Kensington in London, you'll hear more French than English. London is jokingly called the 6th largest French city. There are hundreds of thousands of French professionals in London, New York, Dubai, Singapore, Austin, San Francisco. Why did they leave? They didn't leave because they hate France. They love France. They miss the bread. They miss the wine. They miss their families. They miss the cheese shops and the Sunday markets. They left because they wanted to succeed. They wanted to start a business without the state taking 60%. They wanted to get hired based on their talent, not their labor contract. They wanted to work 50 hours a week if they felt like it without being shamed for it. They wanted to escape the crab bucket mentality that pulls down anyone who tries to climb too high. I have a friend. Let's call him Gene. He's a software engineer from Toulouse. He moved to Austin, Texas 3 years ago. I asked him why. He said, in France, if I drive a Porsche, people scratch the paint with a key because they think I stole the money. In Texas, if I drive a Porsche, people ask me how I made the money so they can do it too. That is the cultural rot. The hatred of success, the tall poppy syndrome, the idea that if you're rich, you must be a thief, that if you're successful, you must have cheated. This brain drain is a national tragedy. Every talented French person who leaves takes their tax revenue with them, takes their innovation, takes their ambition, and France is left with an aging population, a bloated bureaucracy, and a culture that actively punishes excellence. The warning, or why you should care. So, why does this matter to you? If you aren't French, why should you care about the riots in Paris or the pension deficit in Marseille? You should care because France is the laboratory of the West. France is testing a hypothesis. The hypothesis is, can a government tax and spend its way to prosperity? Can we guarantee total security and equality, even if it kills economic dynamism? Can we protect everyone from everything and still have a thriving economy? The results of the experiment are in, and they are terrifying. The result is a society that is stagnant, angry, and divided. A society where the young burn down the libraries because they don't believe the books contain any future for them. A society where the rich live in fortresses and the poor live in ghettos, separated by a police force that's running out of tear gas. And the scary part? The United States, Canada, and the UK are copying the French homework. Look at the rising debt in the US, over $35 trillion and climbing. Look at the expanding bureaucracy. Look at the disconnect between the coastal elites and the flyover states. Look at the increasing reliance on government subsidies, student loan forgiveness, and stimulus checks. We're all becoming French. We're all trading our dynamism for security. We're all borrowing from our children to pay for our comfort today. We're all building elaborate social safety nets that are mathematically guaranteed to collapse. France is just further down the road. They're 10, maybe 15 years ahead of us. They're showing us what happens at the end of the line. When the money runs out, the riots begin. Final thoughts. France is a beautiful country. It's a place of incredible history, art, wine, and culture. Walking through the streets of Paris or Lyon or Bordeaux, you understand why people fall in love with it. You understand why it's been the dream of the world for centuries. But right now, France is a luxury hotel where the staff has gone on strike, the kitchen is on fire, and the management is hiding in the penthouse, still billing the guests for rooms they can no longer service. The entitlement trap has snapped shut. And getting out of it will require a level of pain that modern democracies might not be able to survive. It will require telling an entire generation of retirees that they won't get what they were promised. It will require dismantling labor protections that people have organized their entire lives around. It will require politicians to commit career suicide for the good of the country. Do you think that's going to happen? Neither do I. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And right now, the streets of Paris are rhyming with 1789. The question isn't if France will change. The question is whether the change comes through democratic reform or through fire. What do you think? Can France escape the trap? Or is this the beginning of the end of the Fifth Republic? If you're French, or if you love France, I want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me about the innovation you see on the ground. Or tell me I'm right and share your story of leaving. And if you learned something from this autopsy of an economy, hit that like button. It helps the algorithm, which is the only thing growing faster than France's debt. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.